Hi, Dylan. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Relaxed, getting back in the swing of things now that the new year is here and holidays are over. Got a couple interesting projects going on at work, but it's going well.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the niceness of how quiet the city gets in January when all the holiday hecticness is kind of over.
I'm very much enjoying southern winter. Had to go to Toronto last week, and it's not fun seeing those minus signs in front of the temperatures.
Yeah, gets cold, especially up north. Speaking of New York and the winter in January, Ian, how are you liking this cold weather?
It's fine. My dog doesn't like it, but I have a coat, so it makes it pretty easy. I'm not looking forward to next week when it's supposed to be in the teens, but yeah.
Excellent. And joining us as well, as you heard in the intro, is Chris Allaire. He is the owner and CEO of Verity, which is a very awesome tech recruiting company. And he's actually been doing tech recruiting since 1998, pushing nearly 30 years. And Chris, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. So I have been in this industry on the agency side of technology recruiting since 1998. I have done it on a national level from Boston, San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, North Carolina. I'm pretty sure something in the middle that I've skipped over. I've seen 3 recessions, a pandemic. I've managed and hired probably almost 200 people in my career. I've placed almost 1,000. There's not a lot in the industry that I haven't seen or heard. I'm a people person. I love what I do. I love the people aspect of it. I think the big thing for me is I'm a people advocate, and it's the slogan for my company is people hire people. I'm just a people first person. I genuinely am very interested in what's going on out there and what people do. So it's a great career for me.
It feels like that's a rare thing for somebody to say about tech recruiting. I feel like tech recruiting is an industry that people kind of burn through rather quickly. So, doing it for almost 30 years is actually kind of amazing.
I have thick skin.
To start out, I think we should set the scene a little bit here. It's rare that we get to talk to someone that has, seen tech over, from the 90s, I guess 4 decades now, right? The late 90s into 2000s and 2010s into 2020s. So let's start with what did tech recruiting look like back in the 90s and the late 90s?
So it's, I think, so sales is where I start with it, because it's always been a sales job because it's connecting people with people. There's a lot of sales involved with it. So sales back in the 90s was hardcore cold calling. So you were like back in the day before caller ID, you had a desk phone and people called you and you answered it. So right off the bat, that's really different, right? But the technology itself was VB, Visual Basic, client server, VB, SQL Server. ASP was just on the cusp of coming out. I remember when people were talking about this idea of the internet and active server pages. I remember when PHP was introduced to the community. So I was specialized in VB SQL Server, and then I moved over to the world of C++. And the difference in C++ was whether you're running it on Unix or Microsoft. Oracle and Sybase were your major databases. There's still a ton of DB2 going on out there. Networking was NT. For those of us who may or may remember, I'm dating myself a little bit over here, but NT was the hot skill set you had. Cisco was not around. All the stuff that we know today, it wasn't even heard of yet. Voice over IP. I mean, all these things hit in 1998, 99, and going into 2000. PBX switches, Cisco, your CCNAs, CCNPs, those routing, your certifications were never heard of. The internet wasn't around. I mean, it was pre-internet days. It was faxing. That's where a lot of fax.
We may have to explain that. The kids may not know what a fax machine is.
For a fax number, you're like, that was, you didn't have an email address. If you did, it was what was it, Netscape or maybe a Hotmail.
Yeah.
You borrowed someone's computer to log into your Hotmail account. So that was recruiting back in the day was very, it was, you had a lot of it. Everything was if you had to do a phone interview, it was like last resort. Everything was in person. I started my career in Boston, then I moved out to San Francisco, and everything was an in-person interview. Like, that's just the way things happened. It was beautiful. It was great because it was like, no, if I don't meet this person, I have no idea what they're doing. And you just figured out a way to get to meet them. And I think all the things that were going on were just, it's still this day, but everything was new. But it was, when I got into it, it was, again, client server, networks were slow and old. But the recruiting landscape was it was a lot it was heavy duty communication. And it hasn't changed. It's morphed into different ways of doing it now, but it's interesting the way it's gone over time. But that was 1998 in a nutshell.
What kind of pools were you pulling candidates from back then? Like, people didn't have CS degrees, right? Like, did that exist?
Yeah, so they did, but they were more conceptual. Like, so if you had a CS degree, you were immediately a really good candidate because you understood theory and conceptually speaking how everything put together. Honestly, I don't think a lot's changed since then because I think computer science, mathematics were center stage on what made the foundation of a really good candidate. And also, like, again, not that things have changed a lot, but the curiosity on what you can do with computers. So CS degrees are great. How we found people, we ran ads in the newspaper. And people faxed their resume to you. And you walked in Monday morning. I lived right down the street from my office in Boston, so I used to go in on Sunday nights, and so I could get a jump start on all my competition. And I had all the resumes that got faxed in from the night before on my used to put them on my desk in the morning so I could call them. That was. And we ran ads, and honestly, it was a lot of you cold called references for people. So
I got my first job as via a friend of my mom's, of all things.
I used to cold call people's references and introduce myself and say, I know this is really weird, but you're a reference for so and so. This is what I do. If you're ever looking for a job, let me know. And I got some hate mail, but I also got a lot of people that are like, wow, this is kind of brazen. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But I got to
get the leads where you can, right?
It's interesting because, we'll talk about later, but the old headhunting, that's back in the day. It was a headhunter. You had to you had to find people, cold calling through companies, random extensions. Hi, who's this? Oh, this is so-and-so. Great. What do you do over there? I'm like, oh, I'm a DBA. I'm like, shut up. Yeah, I'm a recruiter. Have you ever thought about looking for a job? And that's what you did.
I think that's just so wild to me. They could be like sitting at your desk doing work and you just get a call. It's just a recruiter and just talking to a recruiter on the phone while you're at your job. Like, that's...
Oh, it was, it was what I did.
I definitely never did that in my career.
For those listening, Dylan is nodding his head.
You couldn't hear that in the sarcasm in my voice.
So that was the early days, right? How has it changed, like, going forward? Like, what changes did you see as time went on?
Well, the changes in the business are one thing. The changes in technology are obviously something different. the changes in the business are it became much more of an industry. You know, it's more of it's kind of an expected job, right? You know, back in the day, it was headhunting. It was like, well, you got your job through a headhunter. That's so weird. Or, you know, recruiting was kind of frowned upon. It was a way to put it. But now it's more mainstream. Now it's more of I'm not gonna, I'll say it's a necessary evil. You know, it's expensive cost for the companies, but they understand that this is what has to happen in order to get what you need and to get really what you want. And so it's more of a business, I guess, protocol that you're like, no, we're expected to get the majority of our people through a recruiting service.
I'll definitely second that. When I was at a startup a few years back, we were taking the simple route and getting applicants through sites like Indeed. And yeah, it's convenient, but the general quality of applicants was kind of terrible. I interviewed people who didn't have remotely the correct skill set, but then made it through all the filters in the automated system.
And I know that, again, we can talk about this stuff a little bit later on, but it's automated systems, right? It's 3-letter acronyms that get you through from point A to point B. You know, you check the boxes: title, company, location. VB SQL Server. You know, what I call the TLAs and the FLAs. You know, 3-letter acronyms, the 4-letter acronyms. As long as you have those words on your resume, you are qualified, quote unquote, to do the job, which is BS. So I think it's more of people understand that it's a necessity, and also, you know, much like the agent in sport. You know, in order to, you want representation. You know, you don't want to go. It's not fun to do it alone. You know, looking for a job isn't fun. Looking for a senior engineer is not fun to do. Interviewing for a job is not an enjoyable feat. You know, you don't look forward to it. But you need to have a partner that makes it. You know, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but more makes it amicable to enjoyable, if you will, right? Mm. To look for a job. And they're like, hey, listen, I've got 4 interviews. Like, this sucks. But versus like, hey, I'm looking forward to all these because I'm prepped, I'm ready. I know what they're looking for. I know what they need. I know the people I'm talking to. You know, I know the company. I know what they're building. I know who's using it. I'm prepped on all this information. I didn't really have to do all the research myself. I did enough for the landscape, but I had a partner on the side of it that was doing all this for me. So I think that now that it's more of I don't want to say respectable landscape, but it's expected more than anything else these days, which I love so much, which is great. And when you really put yourself in there as a business partner, and understanding what people are doing, you add a lot of value. And obviously, as a tech is concerned, you know, it's been awesome to see, you know, tech where it is. You know, I'm a huge open source advocate. I love this stuff. And when open source got really hot and heavy back in 2007, 2008. You know, back in the LAMP days, it was awesome to see, people really embracing, those environments and understanding, what you could really do with it. So it's been, so there's a lot's changed in the, almost 30 years that I've been doing this. From the business standpoint, I saw days when tech was the purpose was like, let's see what we can do with technology. Like, let's put a bunch of pretty buttons together and see if we can get bunnies to bounce across a computer screen versus like, let's solve complex problems with technology. Right. So there was like, again, I love dating myself a little bit, but people forget back in the days when Ask Jeeves or eHow were, and I joke about
Alta Vista.
Those were those were my clients. Ask Jeeves, I placed people at, and I remember, and they were like, "No, we're like," when they were describing themselves, I was like, "That's neat. You can go on with this interweb thing that you've created, and you can just search for stuff. How cool is that?" And then obviously Google and Yahoo and all these things have morphed over time, but I mean, God, the ride has been awesome, and it's still cool to see where it's going right now. So
I have to imagine you've seen like more specialization as time went on, right? Like when you first started, there weren't front end engineers, there weren't DevOps engineers, right? Like, is that true?
no, well, no, actually, believe it or not, this it's not true. So you were front end or back end, client server. You had two different sides of it because back in the day it was client, so you were VB, and then server side was SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase. So I know there are still DBAs that are out there, or you were a Unix admin or a Linux admin, or you were an infrastructure engineer or a Cisco engineer. So you still had your, I think actually, believe it or not, I think you had more expertise back in the day because you needed to be like you were in the data center. Versus now like for Chris, for example, is Chris Brandow is, a little bit of DevOps and a little bit of front end, a little bit of back end, or full stack. And I set up my own environments and I do this. So you can do a little bit more of everything these days, where it's morphed for now, like like ML ops now is like, it's a combination of DevOps and machine learning and data versus, years ago, like, yeah, that was like, you had a job and that's what you did. If you were an infrastructure engineer, that's what you did. You
So actually less specialization
you weren't
over
programming.
time.
You were using Python to build reusable pieces to set up environments, not, programming websites or.
And I guess in the early 2000s, everyone was running their own AWS. You had to have those specialized people who knew how to build machines and install switches and run cabling and all of that. So that I get the impression that it was more, there were fewer specialization roles, but you had to know more and be more expert in the things that you did.
Yes. And I remember when I got heavy into the infrastructure side of the business, and if you were CCIE, you had a number. That was like, that was a rare. You were a rare commodity on the market. And if you were a CCIE, all I had to do was call someone and be like, "Listen, I know a CCIE looking for a job," and it was like, "Get that person into my door now," and they could set up those environments. The first recession I went through, the .com bust, everybody, that's kind of what everybody did, so it lost its commodity a little bit. But yeah, you were heavily specialized in some areas, and not that I still think it's there because people. I'm still one of those fans that if you find something you're good at, you do it better than anybody else. But there are people who are a little bit more generalists. But I still think you lean towards, front end or back end. You lean towards, SRE or DevOps. You lean towards security or another area. You lean towards data science, data engineering, data analytics. You know how to do more things because it's available to you and you're kind of required to, but you still lean towards something that's hopefully an interest or a little bit more specialized for you.
We explored that a bit in the last episode, kind of the idea that even though you have full stack engineers these days, people still have a mindset that fits different roles in different areas of the industry better. Like some people are really great back-end engineers and have no design aesthetic whatsoever and generate fuchsia over chartreuse UIs that everyone hates. And on at the opposite end of the spectrum, you have people that can build these beautiful things that wouldn't know a database table if it hit them in the face. So it's, even though you have full stack engineer, there's still different people that are better at different things. So you kind of naturally focus on something that's not the full spectrum of IT.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good transition into what does it look like now, the recruiting landscape, like in 2025? Like, is specialization important? Like, how does it look for different levels? Like, what's the outlook here?
So from a recruiting standpoint,
and getting hired, I suppose.
So, okay. Well, there's different areas. I would say there's different ways to look at it. So recruiting specifically moving into 2025 is I think honestly is not to plug it in, but it's more prevalent than ever. It's more important than it ever has been. The reason why is you have no idea what's real and what's fake anymore. You know, the amount of emails that I get on a day-to-day basis that are not from humans are absolutely ridiculous. I feel like I spend the first 10% of my morning cutting and pasting the word unsubscribe. And it's unbearable. And then you get the same email that's like, hey, forwarding my last email to you, wanted to see if you got it. You're like, I didn't look at it then. I'm not going to look at it now. Delete, spam, and spam. Like, so you have no idea what's real anymore. You know, we went through episodes last year of fake candidates. You know, literally an AI bot interviewing for a job. I just, you know, I don't understand any of it. I don't get it. You know, calling candidates that's names were Joe Smith, you know, that had a sort of a LinkedIn profile, that worked at Amazon or Google or Oracle, and you're like, holy like good degrees, and you're like, man, this is a good candidate based on paper, and then you get them on the phone and they're not real, or they're in a call center in, you know, actually according to the news, in North or South Korea somewhere, and you're just like, I don't understand any of this anymore. So if you're hiring, and God forbid, let alone the spam bots that are applying to 200 ads a month that are, and what they, so the bots will rewrite your resume specific to what the ad says and then apply on your behalf to 200 jobs that you have no idea what the job is, where it is, or what company you have, like you've never even looked at a job ad anymore. So now if you're on the searching end of it, if you are a diligent person and you're looking for a job that you want, you're fighting the crowd of spam bot applicants. And the amount of resumes, like I have data that backs those up. You're talking 2,000 applicants per job, 1.4 resumes per minute. That is an actual number. 1.4 resumes per minute.
That's terrible.
You run an ad at 6 a.m. You walk into the office at 8 a.m. If you do that these days, you will have over 200 applicants in your inbox at 6 o'clock in the morning. You're going to tell me you're online at 6 a.m. looking for a job? No, you're not. The spam bots are doing it for you. And so you have no idea what you're looking at anymore. So if you're an applicant and you're a qualified person looking for a job, you have to fight through that. Good luck with that. Have fun. You're not going anywhere. Applying for a job is always a black hole anyways, but that's where you're going. Now this is the other thing, recruiting, right? Over the years, in people who are internal, and I'm not going to dog anybody on it, but the mistake out there is that internal recruiting is basically you're shoveling ad response. And Dylan, you mentioned it a little bit. You're getting these applicants from Indeed, from all these other sources that are out there, whatever they are, and what you're doing is you're just filtering through resumes. You're dumping them into a system that reads keywords to make sure they have the appropriate acronyms you're looking for, and if they do, you're good. Now, God forbid the acronym you're looking for is JavaScript or Python. And I love Python because it is arguably the most widely used language across the entire board of technology, right? And it's used in infrastructure, it's used in web design, it's used in distributed systems, it's used all over the place. So if you have Python on your resume, you're like, you slip through the cracks and then someone calls you, you're like, oh, we're looking for this. You're like, no, that's not what I do. So now you're on that end of it. Versus recruiting, right? By definition of the word recruiting is someone who seeks you out to be recruited, right? I'm recruiting you for a job. I want you working here. That's recruiting. I saw your background. I want to talk to you. I want to know if you're someone that I want to work with. I want to know I want to recruit you to build something with me. That's recruiting. Recruiting is not going through resumes. So the day and age of like where we are in 2025, if you don't partner with a strategic or specialized recruiting firm that knows what the hell you're talking about, I'm going to tell you, good luck on your own. It happened last year, 6 months of 2,000 applicants and CTOs, VPs, engineer, technology leaders calling me saying, I can't believe it. We still can't find anybody. I'm like, well, that's because your internal team is shoveling through resumes. I had internal recruiters calling me saying, we ran an ad, we got 2,000 ad response. I'm like, well, yeah, what did you expect? And they're like, I'm like, you're not, versus what are you guys looking for? We're looking for this. I'm like, I have 2 people I can get you right now who are awesome at this job. And they're like, how did you do that? I'm like, well, that's what I do. So
kind of the epitome of the bad outcomes there from what you're talking about. 7 or 8 months ago, I was interviewing someone, and you could tell they literally had ChatGPT or whatever up on the other monitor, typing as you ask a question, looking away to turn and answer your question. Wow.
The other thing about it, it's like the idea is like if you're hiring somebody, you want to know that someone's qualified, interested, and available. Those are the 3 things in recruiting that I can't talk about enough. Qualified, interested, and available. You need a party to help you with that. Are you qualified for the job? Sure, your paper looks great. Are you interested in what we're doing? People forget about that thing. You have to be interested in what you're doing, right? Hey, are you interested in this job? Are you interested in the company? Are you interested in what they're building? Are you it's not like the job is not 3 years of Python. Job. What's the job? Python. That's not a job. That's what you're using. What are you building? Who's using it? What's going on out there? Like, are you a nonprofit? Are you what's the betterment of what you're building? Back in the day, it was, you got out of school, you were happy to just get a job at GE, right? I'm going to work at Siemens. I'm going to go work at GE. And your parents are proud of you. My boy's going to go work at GE. I'm happy. It's like, now it's like, well, you're just going to be a cog in the wheel at GE. Like, what's that? Versus what are you really building out there? What is it used for the betterment of humankind?
I'm kind of an example of that. I changed jobs 2 months ago. I was at a prominent tech company, very successful, huge revenues for 5 years, and I left to go to a startup because they were building developer tooling, which is more what I want to be doing. Kind of to your point about interested. Like, I have a job. I'm reasonably happy in my job, but they're doing something that is closer to my interests.
That's in 2025, we're going to see a wild shakeup. And for those of you out there in the tech space, you will all nod your head, because the last 2 years, you've been kind of stuck in your job, minimally for 2 years, because there hasn't been a lot of open jobs. So you haven't had the opportunity to expand what's going on out there, really look around a little bit. So you've been happy to be employed. So now you're still happy you're employed, but you're like, get me the F out of this job as quickly as possible. And if second something else comes up, even for a pay cut, I'm in. And it's expected right now. So on the fact that the access to data I have is that if you are a principal engineer with certain titles and languages, 46% of gainfully employed people are active on the job market, as in hand raised, I'm looking for a job, somebody get me a job. Actively employed, gainfully employed, 46% looking. At least 20% of the people I talk to on a day-to-day basis that are not actively looking are open for another job. And that includes CTOs and technology leaders. So from the top down, people are looking for work, and they are dying for change. We haven't had it in 2 years. The average voluntary turnover in the technology space on an annual basis is 36%. 36%, right? That's why all the overhiring that we heard about, because people knew they were going to lose a third of their team, so they hired to backfill those roles intentionally. And I know this because I've talked to technology leaders on a day-to-day basis, and I know this is what they do. The last 2 years have been 7% voluntary turnover. You're going from 36% to 7%. And the reason why is most of it's been just, obviously we know what the landscape has done over the last couple of years, but it's been a total shit show the last 2 years. And the people that are stuck in their jobs are very active. And the other thing is this is I'm like, the last 2 years, you're dealing with nobody really shut down. You just stopped building stuff. That's what happened. Nobody did anything. No one spent any money. I have CTOs that were laying off their team just to make the bean counters and the CFOs and the controllers happy so they can make the numbers work so their stock price went up. But you haven't built anything. You haven't done anything. No new products hit the market. So basically the equivalent to what I've talked to people about is like you spent 2 years cleaning the basement. You haven't done anything. And now if you're an engineer, you're like, I don't want to clean the basement anymore. I want to build stuff. I want to do things. Like I want to build product. And CFOs and CTO, I mean, these guys they're mad out there. And they're like, and they want to do stuff.
The pandemic was wild for that kind of thing. As far as people cut back drastically on kind of capital expenditure, experimental things, building new things, because all of a sudden you had this giant new cost of moving everyone to remote work. You had office space that you were paying for that no one was sitting in. So there was, even in very successful companies, there was a cutting back of investment in building new things.
I also get a sense that there's some fear, like, kind of across the board right now, right? Like, AI is coming, capital's expensive, like, that has to change how people are making decisions about building new things and hiring. And
I think the last couple of years has been interesting because so again, for those who have been around a while, the new vocabulary is fun. So, and Chris can attest to this, and we all can, right? Is back in the day, remember the data, or if I said the word big data?
Yeah.
Back in 2000, let's go back to 2016. If I said the word data and I said big data, you were like, "Ooh, you have big data?" You're like, "Ooh, I have big data." And now if you had a big data problem, you're like, "Ooh," it's like, that's fun to talk about. And then what were you using to solve your big data problem? Machine learning algorithms. Oh. So as long as you said those words in a sentence, people wanted to listen to what you said. We have a big data problem that we're using machine learning algorithms to solve. And people are like, "Oh my God, you're a genius." I hate to tell you this, that's been around for years. And you used to call it business intelligence. Now
it's called statistics.
Yeah, it's right. It's always yes, or math, right? It's but now it's some same thing was like AI is it's going to take everyone's jobs. I'm like, I hate to tell you this, but we've been doing it for years. AI has been around since 1986, and it's been here forever. Like, so it's just automation. I mean, yeah. So everyone's fear of automation. I hate to tell you this, but we all go to a grocery store. When you go to the grocery store, there's a self-checkout line. That's called automation. Did it take people's jobs? It did. You don't have cashiers anymore sitting in those lines. So did automation take people's jobs? It did. Right? Yeah. Amazon, which we all shop on. Look at all the stores that are closing down because everyone shops online now. Is it taking people's jobs? It is. It's been going on for a long, long time.
I think
it's not going to change.
I think self-checkout is actually a really good prescient example of what's probably going to happen in tech, because self-checkout, grocery stores been ripping out self-checkout for years now because they were losing so much money from people accidentally shoplifting and stealing things because they didn't know how to key in the code. It's like, oh, here's this organic apple that's $5 and I'll just put in the code for the non-organic apple. Or they're like, I don't know if I grabbed an organic apple or a non-organic apple. So there's a lot of stores that are just like, no, like it's actually better for us to have cashiers than to do this self-checkout thing. I think that's what we're starting to realize with AI and tech right now is that, yeah, no, like we had all these promises about all of this stuff that AI was going to enable us to do. And now we're starting to see like, oh no, this thing's just really expensive and it's not giving us the outcomes we want. And it's not giving us like what we were promised. And people are like, okay, maybe we don't need this as much. And it's interesting to me how the narrative around AI has shifted and changed. And I think that's equally applicable to, tech recruiting, right? Because it's like, everybody's like, oh, we don't need recruiters anymore. Everybody's been saying that for forever. We don't need recruiters. Why do you need recruiters? Why do you need this used person salesman to come around and do all of this thing? And it's like, I don't know. When you look at
person salesman,
when you look at the when you go look at the
I don't take offense to this.
that might be the best euphemism I've ever heard.
Pre-owned, Chris. It's pre-owned
person salesman.
Certified pre-owned human. Yes. No, it's interesting because people are just like, no, we can get rid of all of this because, obviously you can just have an AI thing, but no one ever thought about now you have AI shuffling resumes at AI trying to evaluate those resumes. It's just like a spin all the way down to the bottom. And it's just like, well, there's no humans in here, but now you have like, as you said, like 2,000 inquiries into a single job ad. And it's like, yeah, how do you actually sift through all of that? And if 90% of that is like people that aren't qualified, or if you're, God forbid, doing RTO, if they don't live where your office is, then like that's not helpful. That's like a waste. And this thing that was promised is actually like a very bad thing at the end of the day.
Yes, everything you just said is 100% accurate, and I think it's just it's a nice shiny new thing to talk about. Honestly, because like that's the biggest thing that came out last year or last couple of years. Was the only real product that was moving forward was AI based, and I know there's a lot of things going on out there in the world, but I mean, like I love ChatGPT. Don't get me wrong. I've got a lot of automated things that I've built on my end because I could, and I had time to do it, and I'm like, well. But this idea of like replacing human beings with software I'm one of those like I don't think it's ever going to happen. It's you can't replace it with a robot. No, it's one thing if a robot's going to go clean my floors, which I love, by the way. My can we all just turn the robot on and it just vacuums the house for you?
Right.
Awesome, right? I don't need a robot. Getting on the phone and talking to a candidate or CFO or CTO of a company, finding out what their plans are for what the new products they're building, how they're going to do it, who's going to be using it, how they're going to make money doing it, what's the product design going to look like. We don't need robots doing that. And not to be weird, but like and I've always said this, but when you start a company, when you build something, when you have an idea, you go from ideation to creation. The first thing you do is talk to people. Like, I have an idea. I want to build this. Do you want to do this? Hey, how do I do this? That's what you do. You go find people to do it.
Yeah.
From my life cycle, for as long as I've been around, we have tried to figure out a way to eliminate human waste. I don't know how else to say it, right? But I've always said, get rich quick takes a long time to get rich quick. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? Everything has been. We're going to replace recruiters has happened since. I have fun stories. 1999, Monster Board comes out. Monster Boards was started by a company called TMP Worldwide. They were going to replace recruiters. There's never going to be a need for recruiters anymore because now Dice and Monster Board have hit the open market. All people are going to put their resumes online. Everyone's just going to go online to find a resume, and that's how we're going to do recruiting. Recruiters are obsolete. You know what the best part about that is? Monster Board used me. They were in Boston to hire their engineers. You know what the best part about it is? You know where I found the engineers? Off the Monster Board. That's a true story. When TMP was cutting me checks to recruit for them to build their product, and they found out that I was finding the people from the Monster Board. And it was owned by Romney's brother. Matt Romney. It was Mitch and Matt, of whichever one is not the politician. Called my boss, and called me into a back room and tore me a new one for unethical behaviors. And my boss was like, I think he's fucking genius. He was like, you're doing this? And I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. He was like, you're brilliant.
Well, why would you not do it?
He's like, you're brilliant. He's like, oh, I'm really sorry about that. That, like, so people have been trying to replace what I do for a living for as long as I've been doing it. And I'm still here. So I hate to tell you this. It's now, I think it's more relevant than ever, because in 2025, you have no idea if AI is emailing you, if AI is on the interview, if AI is, I see 3 human beings sitting in front of me. That's why I know what you're doing now. Like, yeah, probably. Dylan, you're unfocused. Your background's not your real office. We both know that. That's right.
I totally have an antique bookshelf right behind me.
Yeah,
sure you
definitely.
Do. So that's a real money tree. That's a real guitar. So granted, I'd love to have AI make me on the beach right now, but it's not where I am.
I would love to shift gears a little bit. And so you see a lot of candidates. I'd love to talk about like what makes a good candidate. I think a lot of our listeners probably would like to jump jobs, right? Like you said, they've been in their job for years now. So yeah, like what can they do to look good and get hired?
Okay, network your ass off. I'll be honest with you. You need to talk to people about who you are or what you do. So you get different levels. People understand like what makes a really good candidate for a job is not your history and your background makes you attractive to talk about what you've done. Your attitude, your aptitude, and your intellectual curiosity are what people really hire. And if you're out there and you're hiring and that's not what you're looking for, you should be. Because when someone starts their job, they know how to do things from the past, but they don't know your way of doing it. You interviewed them, so for the 1 or 2 hours that you spoke to that person, you got an idea about how they're doing things. But when you start a job, you need to learn how they're doing, what they're doing, and the way that operates. That requires attitude, aptitude, and curiosity. If you are missing those 3 attributes, you're in my opinion, you're not a good candidate for a job.
As a quick aside, 2 hours, I'm going to hire you immediately to be my next recruiter because I've gone through interview cycles that were days long, like multiple multi-hour sessions. You've already sold me on 2 hours.
I gotta tell you, is like the only reason I would highly suggest someone go through that is more conversational type of stuff to make sure that you understand everything that's happening. But if you can't figure out if someone's qualified for a job in the first 45 minutes of an interview, you need to. That's why you need to talk to me. So you can talk to somebody immediately and be like, this person's really good for what I'm looking for. And anyone who's been on the side of that fence understands that. Within 5 to 10 minutes, you get a good gauge on like, I like where this is going. Let's see what happens. Or like, I don't like where this is going. How quickly can I get the hell out of here? Right. So you should be able. After that, now it's about what's your thought pattern. How do you adjust to situations? This is something we're dealing with. How would you deal with that? What are some suggestions? So that's what you're hiring. So when you're a candidate looking for a job, you need to know what your talking points are to make someone go, holy shit, you're really good at what you do, right? So no different than like, your resume, no one's going to hire your resume. No one looks at your resume and says, make this person an offer, $200,000. Let's hope this piece of paper can come in and, vacuum my floor. It doesn't work that way. They need to know what you do and how you're doing it. So you need to show them attitude. You need to show them aptitude. You need to show them curiosity. You need to show them articulation, that you know what the hell you're doing, right? You can't, I call it the Forrest Gump syndrome. You can't just Forrest Gump your way into the president's office. It doesn't work that way. It worked for Forrest Gump, but that was a movie. It doesn't work that way in real life. You need to understand what you're doing. You know, you need to understand what you're talking about. So for a good candidate, you have to know, like, do your research on what's going on out there. Do your research on what people are doing. And for God, love of God, like, if you're doing this, show some passion behind it. Right? That's what you mentioned earlier. That's what curiosity is a little bit, right? It's passion. It's, I'm genuinely interested, right? And if you're not interested, tell someone, I'm not really interested in what you're doing. But thanks for the call. And I know it's like, it sounds pretty simple, but honestly, that's what it is. Everything else is pretty pictures on paper. Yeah, you can have a degree from a top tier school. I love those things. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not here to dog that type of stuff. But for those of us growing up in certain situations, we couldn't afford to go to a school that cost $100,000 a year. No, I didn't want to put myself in student loan hell. Now, yeah, it's all been forgiven these days, but we didn't know that 25, 30 years ago. Personally, I never graduated from college. I went to school on a baseball scholarship. I got drafted, played professional baseball. I left school to go play professional baseball. I got out of school. I got cut from professional baseball, and I needed a job. I had to rely on my personality. Thank God I have one. Right? So that's what I did. I walked in and I was like, I interviewed for a job and I let my personality shine, and I got hired, and I took to it like a duck to water, and I've been doing it since.
I have a CS degree, but it's from a non-fancy state school.
Listen, I gotta tell you, like I don't put schools. I love MIT and Carnegie Mellon, and I love those types of things, but they look great on paper. But trust me, I had a guy who worked for me who had a degree from Harvard, and he overthought everything. He was a good sales guy, average at best. He was a good human being, but everything was a pain in the ass. And I was like, dude, I can't. I can't work with you. I know the degree sounds good, but terrible at the job.
So in the software space, we're not known for having great personalities, right? Just to be blunt about it.
What do you
What do you mean? I've only grunted at people a couple of times in the last few months.
So what I'm getting at is, do you think the interview is like a skill that can be learned? Like sure, I might be curious. I have the aptitude. I might have a good attitude, but it doesn't come across in an interview, right? Like, is that something that can be practiced and learned, or is that an innate thing?
As long as you can explain what you did and how you did it, you're going to be in pretty good shape. I know that's a lot to ask from a lot of people, and I know it's odd because I know people phenomenal. It's actually, Chris, you and I know some of the same people. They've walked in an interview and they pulled up on a screen like, this is what I built, and someone was like, well, how did you do that? And the guy literally froze. He was like, I really have no idea what I did here, and he just walked out of the interview. And he called me. He's like, Chris, he's like, I bombed. I was like, oh, it wasn't that bad. He's like, no, it was bad. He's like, I literally looked at everything. It's like, I totally forgot everything, what I had done. I'm like,
yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so that was a tough one. And then I got a call from CTO. Was like, wow, that was bad. And I was like, oh man, it's what it happened. So, but honestly, like, if you understand what you did, how you did it, and you can explain that to someone, you're gonna be in good shape.
Yeah, kind of related. Even like doing this, what we're doing here, sitting, doing a podcast. For me, it was taking the plunge and doing public speaking, submitting a paper to GopherCon and getting picked, and having to prepare a presentation and get on stage and talk in front of people. It makes you a better, to Ian's point, like, it lets you exercise those muscles and become a better communicator.
It's also knowing the job the job you're applying for, right? If you're going to be, if you just want to put headphones on and code, that's all. I mean, then you need to be able to speak and code, and there's again, there's a job for everyone like that. If you want to be consumer facing, you need to have that skill set. You need to understand technical jargon. Like when you're talking to someone like me, who I get it, but like I don't know all the, I know what I need a widget that does that does this, and you're like, I understand what you're saying. I can translate that into code and have the backroom developers build that stuff for you, right? So you need to understand the job that you want and why you want it and how to communicate that. That's I think is a big thing, is this idea of people want, they want a job either they don't know why they want it, or they just want it because they just want to go do something. It's something like they want to do something else, or it's kind of like management. Like I want to manage people. It's like, well, why do you want to manage people? You have any idea what's in store for you? Like, well, that's the next step in my career. Like, not to be rude, but it's not. Like, there's a lot of other jobs that are available not managing human beings. Managing human beings is a very difficult task, and if you're not ready for it, you're gonna get tossed into a fire that's gonna turn you off. There's architecture. There's consultative approaches. There's a lot of other things that you could be doing. So if you know the job you want, you know why you want it, then practice, have conversations with friends, colleagues, or people like me that can help you talk about it. What you're building, who uses it, why it's important, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. Those are very simple conversations to have. So you can have them with yourself, write them down. That's how you prep yourself on these types of interviews. If you want to be a staff level lead engineer, right? I think it's like you need to know why you want it, but also it's like you need to understand that when you get in that position, you need to lead by example. People are going to peg you with questions on what you did, how you did it, and why you did it that way. And if you're not prepared to answer these questions, they're not judging you. I like to think they're not, but they're curious. They're like, how the hell did you do that? And if you don't know what the hell you just did, you're not a lead. You're just a senior person. So I think that's the difference between like this idea of like a senior level engineer versus like a staff level or lead engineer, is that ability to explain what I'm doing. I'm doing this, watch. And then you're like, ready? And then all of a sudden you're like, boom. And they're like, holy shit, that was really cool. And you're like, I know it was cool, right? And then you're that mentor, you're that guide.
To me, that's been the step up to staff level, is kind of absorbing the idea that it's your job to become a force multiplier, to show other people what you did and why it works, and then hand it to them to go and do it for themselves. You can be a very senior coder, may crank out things all day long, but that's different than being a staff plus principal engineer, where it's your job to guide others on the path rather than be the person with hands on keyboard spending your day cranking out code.
I think yes. And in my opinion, what you're looking at is when you hire someone at that position, that staff plus principal plus is the big picture, right? Someone needs to be like, that's the person who's thinking about this stuff at night. Like, we're building X, but they know what they're building, but they know why they're building it. They know the ins and outs. They know the industry. They know how it's going to be used. They see what other people are doing. They're like, I have an idea. And then they bring that idea to the table, and then they explain that idea. The senior people are the people who typically are the ones who get the idea and just they work on their own and they can just get it done. Like, they don't need any guidance. Everyone needs a little bit of management, but they don't need management. They just they see it and they do it. They're like, no, I did it. We're good. Like, they understand, they figure it out on their own. They know how to think outside the box. They're efficient. They're effective. They're great at what they do. The staff plus senior people are the ones out there that are going, I see change. We can do this better. We can build reusable pieces for the rest of the developers to use. We can if you're working in the streaming service, for example, big, huge industry right now, and you'll notice that they're all doing the same thing. So if you start to study what Amazon Prime is doing, and you start to study what Netflix is doing, and you're working for another one of those organizations, something like that, you see what they're doing. And you know why they're doing it, and you know how to, and you're going like, you know what, we can do that. I'm going to design something and present it to be used. So you have to have that skill set. You have to. If you want that job, you have to have that skill set.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I'd also like to talk a little bit, I don't know your experience here, but people that want to come into the field of computing, you know, maybe they just finished college or a boot camp or something like that. Or even deciding if they want to do something like that. So like, are all the same qualities, are the qualities the same for someone junior that make them stand out?
Yes, in my opinion. I think junior, nowadays, what you need to understand concept more than anything else, because there's so many things changing, and the space is so it's evolving daily. Because everything you knew 2 years ago is not relevant anymore. Like whatever you were coding in 2 years ago, maybe not 2 years ago, but like 3-4 years ago is irrelevant, right? It's morphing in front of you as you speak. So you need to conceptually understand how things are put together and how they're built. And the language you need to be kind of agnostic. I still think you need to be kind of specialized if you're using Python or Go or Java or whatever it is out there. You need to understand it, but you need to be able to adapt to a new environment quickly to find the best solution. So you need to understand conceptually what's happening, and you need to understand that there's more than one way to get to the solution of what you have. Because you're going to hit bottlenecks constantly. And if you're stuck in like, no, this is how to do it, and it's not working, you're in trouble. So
kind of on that is something I've definitely seen. So I'm similar to Chris. I started in 98, but then I essentially did the same job from 2001-ish until 2010, early 2011. Same language, same tech stack, same general system, compared to now, like you say, it's something completely new every 2 to 3 years. Like you can't just be one thing. You may be the world's foremost expert in, as a prime example, AngularJS, and then throw it all out the window and start over because it changed. So it's much more important to, like you said, Chris, understand the concepts and the ideas more so than specialize in some particular thing. It's a good way to get hired. If all you, kind of like you said, if all you want is a job, good way to get hired to go through a boot camp and learn something and find a job doing that thing. Not a good way to have a career, in my opinion.
Yes, I'll put it that way. And I can look at, Chris Brandow was this way. Is like, when you and I first met, you were a Drupal developer.
Yep.
A long time ago. Drupal 6. And then all of a sudden Go, right?
Yeah.
And there was 3 companies in Manhattan that were using Go back in the day. And one of them was Google. So, and I introduced you to a company that was like, we're going to be using Go. And you're like, I like Go. Yeah. And all of a sudden it went from like, the thing is like, you want to try to find a PHP developer these days? Like, I'm like, I don't really, not a lot of people really using PHP anymore. So it's like, so this idea of like, I call it, you don't understand the horse, you understand the horse race. Mm. And there's always going to be, multiple runners in it, whether it's Go, Python, Java, right. Even the DevOps space has changed, with microservices and, back in the day, it was like, back in the day, this is how, it's not even back, like Docker and Kubernetes. He's like, that's not even that old, but now it's old. You're like, well, now it's everything. It's like, now it's ML ops or whatever people are doing these days, right? So if you conceptually understand the way things are put together and the way it worked and what people really want, you're going to be okay. So that's why I want understand what you're doing, understand why you're doing it, understand how you're doing it. If you can put it together, you're going to be in good shape. I think if you want to study anything in school, security is front and center, in my opinion. The most not talked about essential tool that no one will talk about, that everyone knows that we need more than anything. And it's been going on for years. But it's like everyone's like, there was a data breach, and everyone's focus went to the data. Like, what's the data? And I'm like, the data, like how did the breach happen? Like, how did Experian have a breach? Like, how did that dam break? Can we focus on like where, like how that happened? Everyone's so worried about like, oh my God, my social security number leaked. It's like, I hate to tell you this, but on the open web, you can find anything you're looking for. Anything.
See, you're exposing recent trauma for me. I was at a security company, and we were very good, and we were focused on stopping breaches. And then there was an issue last summer, and things got.
You grounded one of my flights.
I'm sorry for that.
Oh yeah,
it wasn't me personally. If that helps,
you cost my favorite airline $500 million.
Well, yeah, not you personally, but
yeah.
So security is security. I guess the point of that is security's hard. I mean, we still have people today with their Gmail password is password, or it's their
That's so wild.
Their last name.
Okay. Security is. I think if like everyone talks about data or AI and all this other type of stuff that's out there, but security is. It's the blocking, tackling. Security is critical, and I think it's still. I love it because I have. I think that it is the most silent, sought after, confusing thing that everyone is silently talking about, but no one's out loud talking about it.
Yeah.
So school for security would be good. Do you have a sense of like these boot camps, worth doing, not worth doing?
No, I don't. I think they're great for good foundational practices if you're really interested in doing it. Like if you got a degree in history or, communications and you're like, 5 years in your life, you're like, I don't know what the hell I want to do, but I'm genuinely really interested in learning how to program. You're going to go to a boot camp. You're not going to go back to school to get another 4-year degree in computer science. You're just not going to do that. But if you want to learn how to do something, that's a great way to do it. So I think I think it depends on who you are and your attitude and your aptitude. And if you're just doing it to go through it because like, oh, I just, if I become a programmer, I'm going to make lots of money. Like no, it doesn't work that way. You think it works that way because perception is reality, but it doesn't really work that way. But if you're like, I genuinely love this stuff and I'm wicked curious on the way it works, then that's a good reason to go do it. And then that's going to help you. So it really depends on the individual.
Yeah, I think
I would.
Yeah, so it really does sound like it all comes down to like attitude, curiosity, and
I think it's everything in life, right? Isn't that like if you're super interested in what's going on out there, you're going to find a reason to go do it and figure it out. And that's what we do.
Yeah, kind of to the.
But I mean, hey, listen, like not to be weird, but like there's button pushers, and we all need those people, and they're awesome. And this is not a downplay to anybody like that. I just know that if you want to push the envelope, you have these are what you have to do.
Yeah, to bring it back to like the title of the episode, should you pursue a career in coding? Yes, if that's what you enjoy doing.
So a lot, like, again, I am a self-proclaimed total geek. I love this shit. I was that guy that I used to hack my Commodore 64. For anybody who's old enough to understand what that is, that's an old computer. Okay, it was an old computer, right? This is the term, the common term known for most is the old computer.
That's from back when monitors weighed 200 pounds.
Oh,
and they were this big.
Oh, it was a box the size of my desk. Yeah, and I love this stuff. I just didn't want to sit behind a desk all day. I just didn't, programmed in Pascal. I love this stuff. I still hack crap all the time. It's not what I want to do. It's not what I want to do on a day-to-day basis. So I will not pursue it. But I love the industry. I love talking to people who do it. But that's what I do, because I'm curious about the human being, what's being built and how it's being built and what's out there, what's pushing the envelope and what's going on, not if you're using tabs or spaces.
Yeah. I would love to hear from you, like, the people that do love the industry, but, have tried programming and it's kind of not for them. What are the other options?
Product.
Product.
Product. I love how product is now the marriage with tech, how the CPO and the CTO are the perfect union. So you have your internal tech teams that are running things internally for your practice and highly necessary. But you have to have product that's out there on the open market that's making you money. Without product, you don't have any income. Any income, you don't have any company. Hey, that's economy 101. So if you want to be involved with it, but you don't want to sit behind the desk all day or behind the monitor all day long, go with something that's heavy product focused. Because product requires it should require, but you're on the front lines of who's using what and why. Like, what do I want? As a general consumer, what do I want? And you have to communicate that. Because then you're out there on the front lines talking to people about what's being used, how it's being used. That's product. Product is critical. Now product can be used by the external user or the internal user. And a lot of people forget that. And I know, Chris, like you and I have gone through this a long time in your career. It's like, who's using what you're building. There's been reasons why you hated your job, because you're like, I'm just building this tool that no one's using. This is stupid. Get me the hell out of here. Versus like, I'm building this tool that the worldwide audience is implementing. This is really freaking cool. That's, so looking at it that way can hopefully, in my opinion, take people who love tech, who are into it, who are very extroverted, and they're trying to figure out a way to use that type of it. There are still project managers. There are still business analysis that's out there that are huge for these organizations. So there's a lot of jobs that are out there that you can use. I think product, in my opinion, is kind of first and foremost.
Yeah, it really does seem like it's kind of the same, not skill set, but mindset. Like, you're still solving problems. You're still finding problems, presenting solutions.
Yeah,
that seems good.
Like you said, Chris, at the end of the day, the industry is not about the code we write. It's about creating something that people will pay us for.
Yes. Because if no one's buying it,
what are you doing?
Yeah, not to be weird, but in economics, you sell something, they buy it. That's how exchange of goods and services. That's how money.
Yeah, there's not a lot of runway for your startup if no one's giving you money.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and that's been the interesting part. Is like, I've done this, for as long as I've been doing this. It was like, the big change I've seen from the .com boom to the modern day era was, I did the .com boom for those interested. I did the .com boom in San Francisco, which was the hub of the .com boom. And it wasn't a business case. It was a technology case. It was like, let's see what technology can do. Not, we have a business problem, let's solve it using technology. The companies that solved their problem using technology triumphed. The companies that were just playing with tech to see what it could do failed. And, you know, what we went through, what we've evolved a lot is over the years was we have a business problem, let's use technology to solve our business problem. And then that's where we've changed a lot. You know, I loved it because people who don't like, again, I love dating myself because this is fun. Everyone is familiar with OpenTable. I recruited the first 10 engineers OpenTable hired. The OpenTable was 3 people when I met with them in San Francisco in 2000. Now it is the hub for, like, I don't think, if you call a restaurant, I don't think they know how to take a reservation. Like, they're like, you have to go to opentable.com. You're like, yeah, but I have you on the phone. Like, yeah, that means I have to log into OpenTable and I don't have an account.
In an interesting small world coincidence, one of the smartest young engineers I worked with 10, 11, 12 years ago-ish actually went to OpenTable. And I believe he's still there today.
That is really the epitome of solving a business problem. Like,
Yeah.
a very clear cut, like, we're going to solve this.
OpenTable. Toast is another example of that, where it's just like, no, we're just going to take all these bad POSs and get rid of them. I mean, POS is like the perfect acronym. I love that they're called POSs because it's like, yeah, that's kind of what they are.
We're talking point of sale,
Point
not
of sale.
pieces of shit.
Yes, point of sale systems.
Why not both?
Yeah, exactly. But like, yeah, Toast came in and they're like, yeah, we're just gonna revolutionize. We're gonna give you an iPad, give you a cash drawer, give you a little tablet, and boom, we're gonna make everything better. Because they're like, we're actually gonna solve a problem with the technology instead of just being like, oh, well, what fun thing could we do in this space? It's like, no, let's actually solve people's problems.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have one more question based kind of on this conversation. If we flip the script and I'm interviewing for jobs, do you have any advice on choosing the right company? Like, have you seen people stay a long time and be happy? Is there a common thread there?
No. So short answer is find a company that, or at least the project that they're building or working on genuinely interests you. Secondary, make sure it's someone you want to work with and you want to work under, who's going to provide you guidance, leadership, and also, I'm just trying to think of a way to say it, but basically put their money where their mouth is. Like someone who does the job. So good leadership is critical if you're looking for a job. So a project that interests you. The tech is always, it is what it is. And good leadership. And if when you combine those things, you're genuinely you're happy at what you do. A lot of times the reason why people leave their job is because the job has become boring, or typically it happens, the new person they're working for, or there's been a management structure change and there's a new manager that's been, assigned to your division, and the person is just a joke. You're like,
I've definitely experienced that.
Yeah,
there's the cliche.
There's a lot of heads going. There's a lot of people listening to this right now. Their heads are like, "Oh yeah, that's absolutely
the cliche that goes around social media every few months. People don't leave jobs; they leave managers.
Yeah, it's like you see it often. But I mean, that's one of the things that I'm that I say like all the time is like, just because you can manage, I'm like, again. So if you're going to interview for a job, you should make sure the project's something you want to do. The company itself, honestly, it's like companies are just things that look good in your resume these days. Whether it's GE or NBC or pick an acronym or an organization. I just happen to use those two. Actually, they're the same company, which is funny enough.
Well, I mean, really, there are only like 8 companies in the world, and they're all just subsidiaries of each other.
Yeah, they're basically all owned by Google, anyways. or Disney, right? So, Disney owns the human population, Google owns the internet. Can we all agree with this? But so if you like the project, you're in good shape. And if you like the person you're working with, you're in pretty good shape. Your life expectancy at a company is 18 to 24 months maximum. It's an odd thing to say. It's just the way it works. If I've been doing my job for a long time, and you used to have a pretty valid reason for leaving. You don't need one anymore. And it's pathetic, but it's true. Most of the time I talk to people, I'm like, why are you looking for another job? You're like, well, I've been here for 2 years. It's just time to look. And you're like, that's a good enough reason. So if you've been at your job, now the problem, here's the funny thing is, and I'm not going out there telling everybody to quit your job. Actually, I am telling you, quit your job. And call me. But if you've been at your job for 5 years, sometimes you're almost questioning if this person can adapt themselves to a new environment. But if you've been there if God forbid, if you've been at your job for 10 years, it's actually almost frowned upon that if you've been at your job for 10 years, right? The day and age of people spending their career at Hewlett Packard or IBM is the best one, right? Because you're an IBMer. I have good friends of mine who left IBM, right? Friends of mine, literally, who were cloud architects and what they want. But they had to leave IBM because they were there for so long. They're like, I need to leave before I'm dubbed an IBMer. And I'm like, that's it's true, but it's weird. So now,
it's interesting you
hiring. I tell them too. I'm like, if you're looking for someone who's going to be with you for the eternity of the organization, you are wrong. You hire someone so they can do that's hiring is a whole different story. You're hiring someone because you're like, this person's awesome, and they're going to make an impact here, and I love them. Now, what's going to happen 2 years from now? Go ahead. You look in your crystal ball, and you tell me that there's what's going to happen 2 years from now. I love it because people always ask, where are you going to be 5 years from now? I'm like, I don't know, a pandemic? Did anyone see 2020 happening? No. No one saw it. Wrong.
Yeah, no one called that one.
You have no clue what's going to happen. So just, take it day to day. And when you're hiring people, that's what you hire them for. So when you're taking a job, don't start looking at it being like, I'm going to spend the rest of my career in this seat. No, you're not.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I may be the exception, and it may be because I'm an old guy. I don't go into it thinking I'm taking this job for now, and in a year I'll see what else is out there. I've never been a job hopper. I had 2 quick jobs, but then I did 11 years and 4 years, and I really only left that job because private equity bought out the company, and they told us we all didn't have jobs anymore. And then I did a short startup stint, and then 5 years. And I've been in my current role for 3 months now, but I guess I'm not in a mind state where I would look for something else in 2 years, unless something changes and I'm no longer happy or satisfied, or if there's something cutting off kind of career ladder things. Well, I have disagreements with other people who I would have to work with all the time if I continued in this role, kind of thing.
So I'm glad you said that, because I'm not saying to take a job in order to look in another couple of years. I'm saying that, I'm glad you said it, because I do think that I'm the same boat. It's I'm going to take this job because it's going to be good for the next couple of years. You want everything to turn out, but if you're thinking to yourself, this is the person I'm going to marry, you might take it one step at a time. Date first, see where it goes. Yeah. And if you love it, then you're there.
Yeah, it's kind of
that's awesome.
You want to enter into it with the idea that you might be there for 5 or 10 years if things go great, but you should plan that you might need to be looking in 2 years, because that's what's likely going to happen. Because if you plan to stay and then you do get to stay, great. But if you plan to stay a long time and then things shift, but you haven't prepared yourself for needing to shift, it's going to be a lot harder to shift when you need to shift. You'll probably stay there longer than you should have as a result.
Yeah, like I've been at my job for 5 years now, but I have interviewed multiple times every year I've been at that job, you know? Like you just gotta, and at the end of the day, like I chose to stay, but not because like I didn't have options. It's because I wanted to stay, right?
Yeah, and I would say my attitude has shifted in those 5 years and change since I kind of made the shift from being effectively a small local job market engineer for 18 years to kind of branching out and getting hired on at a tech startup, successful, and going to conferences and meeting people. And now it's kind of more, I like my job, but if someone comes and throws out this amazing idea and kind of like, yes, I love my job. I love what I do. I'm doing this job because it's what I want to do. But at the same time, like the horizon is wider than it was 7 or 8 years ago when I was at the top of the job market in our local industry.
Yeah, I think it's like a good place to have like another analogy to like a creative field where I kind of think of it a lot like acting, where it's like you don't expect an actor to like just do like one show for their entire career. There's people that do it, right? There's like Mariska Hargitay, but like she is forever Olivia Benson. Like she couldn't go somewhere else and be like, oh, that's weird. Why is Olivia Benson in this show? And I feel like that happens with some people where it's just like, yeah, that's Law and Order SVU. It's just like people, you're just like, oh, you're just on that show or you're just at that company. That's just what you do. That's who you are. Whereas if you want to be someone that can like do a bunch of things, yeah, that requires like hopping around and moving around and adjusting. And I think for most people should be expected that you're not going to be Mariska Hargitay, where you're not going to be the person that's like on the same show for 25 years. You're not going to be at the same company for 25 years. And, you know, if something happens and that happens to be where you land, great, wonderful, but don't go in expecting that. Go in expecting, you know, the average thing to happen to you and, you know, be prepared for that because that's the most likely thing that will happen.
I'll show my age again. For me, that analogy is Ed O'Neill is Al Bundy.
Yes, he is, by the way.
No matter what he's in, he is Al Bundy.
Oh, and I hate to say it, but it's in Kelly Bundy. Bud Bundy.
Yes.
It's, yep. There's a reason why
for the young folks, Married with Children was a great show in the 90s. It was probably before your time.
Yeah.
So, I had no idea what you're talking about.
So I know I love it. It's like you see Carrie Fisher and you're like, that's Princess Leia. Yeah. So, but I think I'm trying to think adaptability. You know, it's the way businesses are these days. Like you have no idea what's going to happen. You know, how many times like what happened to you, Dylan? Right? You go into a company and then all of a sudden private equity buys it out, or they outsource everything, or you know, F all of them. They lay off a shitload of people to make the stock price go up, which they should all burn in hell for that. But it worked for Mark Zuckerberg. So you have no idea what's going to happen out there. So yeah, you want to like you take a job, you expect like no, looking for a job sucks. You don't want to look for a job. You don't take a job looking forward to looking for another job. Like that's not what hopefully that's not what people do. I took this job. I can't wait to get back on the market. You know, it's you know, it's you want to take a job that you're fulfilled with, and you should. But you also need to understand that, like you said, like there's other things that are going on out there, and if someone approaches you with the next best thing, you got to be open to listen to it. Doesn't mean you take it, but you should listen. You know, the average tenure of my company right now, after even all the turmoil we went through the last couple of years, is almost 7 years. So I've got a guy that's been working with me for 9 years. 2 guys have been with me for 7. Another guy's been with me for 8 or 9 or something like that. And that's after and they got I know for a fact all of them got a boatload of offers the last couple of years to go do something else, and none of them left. No, a couple left, and I wished them well. And that's what happens.
A testament to how good of a company you're running.
It is what it is. So Business is business. You know, I know people that will follow their manager. I think there are a lot of us out there. You work for somebody, you love that person. They leave, they go somewhere else, and your next step is right where they went. And they call you and they're like, hey, you want to come join me over here? You're like, yep, absolutely. Let's go.
You just need plausible deniability that they didn't call you, because then you get into the gray area of non-competes. And
Oh, absolutely. That's because you bumped into them at the bar.
Yeah. Although I think non-competes are illegal now. Didn't the labor board
they're
strike that down?
largely unenforceable.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Non-competes.
Anyway, before we start getting into employment contract law, let's transition to our final segment of the show, Unpopular Opinions. So, Chris, start with you. I know you have many, many, many unpopular opinions, but just pick one. It can be about anything. Doesn't have to be tech related, but give us an unpopular opinion. And just to add context, unpopular opinion is something that you think is great, but you also think is unpopular with most people.
Wow. AI is going to replace us all, and we're all just a bunch of drones.
I don't feel like you believe that, though.
I don't believe it. I think it's bullshit.
It's supposed to be something
I
you
don't it at all.
believe.
So unpopular opinion, I think it's an unpopular. I just know everyone is saying it, so it's kind of one of those like I'm so tired of hearing it. Something I believe that's unpopular.
Or that other people would disagree with.
Yeah.
You need to learn how to farm your own food.
Okay.
Learn to grow food.
Yeah.
The two Manhattanites their brains are breaking right
at me
now.
going like, how the hell am I going to do that? Yeah. The cost of food is not going down.
Oh, that's yeah. I mean, yes, I'm a Manhattanite, but I did grow up in the rural land, so like farming is not foreign to me.
I mean, like you know, like even just I'll put it this way: like 1% of the population are farmers. Less than 1%. Less than 1% of the population feed 100% of the population.
Yeah.
Think about that one. So, if I learn how to do that,
Learn to farm.
it's a good skill set to have.
Through the magic of technology, I still live in an area of the country where there are people who grow their own food and raise their own livestock.
Yeah. You don't have to go homestead.
Yeah, and
But
I have high-speed internet, and I work in tech.
Because I'm gonna tell you this: like you'll go to the store, and a cucumber costs $3.
Mm.
A cucumber seed costs 7 cents, and it grows 14 to 18 cucumbers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the price of eggs not going down anytime soon. So
No, eggs are $8.99 for a dozen eggs.
Cucumbers are definitely a good gateway vegetable. They don't require a lot of effort.
It's and green beans.
I hear owning
Homegrown
chickens is
green beans
also pretty easy.
Chickens are a mess. They're easy to care for, but
You have to be dedicated to chickens.
their byproducts tend to be inconvenient for your sitting outside in the yard and enjoying nature.
That is a fact. They stink.
They unfortunately do.
Yeah, and unless you want a pet coyote, then you will have lots of them strolling through your premises. Foxes, coyotes, raccoons.
all right.
Known as predators.
So everyone should learn, or people should learn to make their own food, to farm.
People should learn how to grow food.
Yeah.
I also have a food-related one for
Go
this
for it.
episode. Lobster's not that great.
I agree. Not a big lobster fan.
I mean, I've had lobster that was good, but in general,
They used to feed lobster to prisoners. There's actually laws that say how often prisoners can have lobster. It's true. Look it up.
Down here in the deep south, we eat tiny lobsters, and we call them crawfish.
Oh yeah, crawfish. Yeah.
Okay.
I do love a lobster roll, though.
I think this is very unpopular with Chris because he's just.
I'm not. I don't even have words. I'm from New England. The home of the lobster, where lobster was invented, and we and I like staple, and it is my favorite food from the sea. So
You just lost any chance of Chris ever helping you get a new job.
All right. Okay. Interesting. Ian, do you have an unpopular opinion?
Come back to me. You go first.
I gotta think of. I was gonna take the time that you were talking to think of an unpopular opinion. Let me summon one. I'm blanking on good unpopular opinion. Somebody say something controversial so I can think of one.
I burned up all my controversial stuff on the Gems and Warts episode that we just published.
Yeah, that one.
Controversial. Taxis should be self-driving cars.
Ooh, okay. That's I can that did me good.
Although we should outsource taxi drivers.
Okay, so I'll do a twofer. One, self-driving cars are never going to happen, so we all just need to get over it and stop believing that nonsense. I think that's one. Just the ridiculousness of believing that you're going to be able to have a car that can drive on. Once again, I grew up in the rural area. Like self-driving cars on back roads. No, thank you. Like, no, absolutely not. Like,
I think you're wrong. I think it'll happen. It's just not going to happen all that soon.
I think if it's the same kind of thing that, like, you know, back in the 19 teens when they're like, cars are going to make everybody's life better, and it just made everything worse, and all the promises they made were all nonsense and never happened.
Not everything.
Okay, most things. So I think that
your city person is really coming out right now, Chris.
once again, I grew up in the rural. This isn't even I think the self-driving cars would never work in Manhattan. That's for sure. That's just going to be a mess. I think in like cities built for driving, maybe sort of, but like in the suburbs, probably not. In the rural areas, absolutely not.
In densely
populated cities, no.
I feel like self-driving would work better in somewhere like Manhattan because you take the whole human element out of the driving. And
No. Like, we would constantly just cone the cars. Like, what? Like, no, driving in Manhattan, like, you have to be able to adapt very quickly.
Get out of your car, put a cone.
Because, like, people will just keep walking in the street. Like, if there's just going to be a self-driving car that you know is going to stop for you, you're just going to cross. Because that's what people do now. I don't know. Sometimes I cross, and I'm just like, yeah, I didn't have the right of way, but too bad. So that's why it would not work in Manhattan. We just do not wait for anything. If we're going to cross, we're going to cross. And those self-driving cars, because those companies don't want to get sued, are just not. And there's a whole bunch of other reasons. But anyway, the other thing that I think is unpopular right now, but not be unpopular in a few years, is I think congestion pricing in the business district of Manhattan, absolutely fantastic. Absolutely love it. It's one of the best things we've done in the past like year in the city. Like, I already see the reduction in traffic, the reduction in honking outside my window at night. It's great, wonderful. I know lots of people don't like it, but it is truly fantastic, and I'm so happy we did it.
I gotta look up. I saw that when I was up in New York a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't had a chance to Google it yet. But it's real, right?
Yeah. No, costs, if you're driving in Manhattan during the daytime, below 60th Street, costs you $9. And it is fantastic.
I did come up with a unpopular opinion.
Okay.
All right. When you like go to a museum or you're visiting a city on vacation and stuff, getting guided tours is always worth it. Like, most people don't do it, but you should. It's always better. I don't know if that's unpopular or not, but I don't see very many people doing it, so it feels unpopular. But it's always better.
Guided tours. Oh, I don't know.
I don't know about always better, but I see what you're saying, because I've done them in cities, and you learn some really cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That
you have to have a good tour guide, but if you get a good tour guide, like, they're phenomenal.
So it's interesting because I'll chime into this one. So I did one in Savannah, Georgia, and if you've ever been to Savannah, it's a beautiful town. But a lot of people don't know this, that Savannah is like more haunted than Salem. Savannah was built on graveyards.
Oh.
Like there were bodies found in walls of buildings.
Oh.
But
Remind me not to go to Savannah.
Not living bodies. Well, I'm assuming they're not living. But I found that out by taking the guided tour of Savannah.
Yeah, we have similar tours like that in the French Quarter in New Orleans, where you go down and you get in a horse-drawn wagon, and there's a tour guide who's lived there and knows all the history, and you're going down these tiny streets, and they're talking about why no one lives on the third floor in the French Quarter. It's because that's where the ghosts live.
Yeah, and they'll tell you things you don't even know to Google, right? Like you could do your research and you'd still never find it.
Okay.
And you get to see some, and they take you down places that you never thought that you would go. I did that actually in New Orleans. I did the a guided tour, and there and there was only 2 of us that were with it. And so the woman was like, "I guess I'll take you to places that we're normally not allowed to go." And so we went to a place it was like 2 weeks before Mardi Gras, and we went to the place that we're building all the floats. And it was a Segway tour, so we were on a Segway. And she took us like all these really cool back alleys into this warehouse. So they were building and painting the floats used for Mardi Gras. And normally it was like people aren't allowed in here, but there's only 3 of us, so I guess we can go do this. And it was really cool because we got to have our pictures taken with like all these really cool floats.
Okay, that's cool. This
That's incredible.
Unpopular opinion. There you go.
Ah,
Maybe it's popular. Who knows?
Maybe I know a lot of people that don't do it.
yeah. Well, we shall see. But yeah, I think that's it for this episode. Does anybody have any last words before we close out? I mean, aside from get yourself a recruiter. That's the main thing. If you want a job, get a recruiter. And importantly, I will say this. Get one that actually cares about you. Because I think there's a lot of recruiters out there that are just trying to, once again, be the used person salesman, just kind of shuffle you into a job. And if there's one thing I will say about Kris is that, you as a recruiter, you care about the long-term relationship. Like I remember there was one time when you had me in you had an offer basically come in for me. You're like, oh yeah, this company's going to give you an offer. And I had done my own, like an internal recruiter had reached out to me for a much more prominent company. And I got an offer from them. And I remember you just told me, you're just like, oh, I'm just going to call the other company and tell them you're coming because you're definitely taking this job. But don't be stupid. Take that job. And
no, I remember you called me and I was like, you told me the job and I was like, you should take the job.
Yeah.
You should take that job.
Yeah, go there.
So you're like, what? And I've done that to other people before. I'm like, no, you should take that job. I'm like, I totally going to ruin my paycheck.
Yeah. Find a recruiter that cares more about that long-term relationship than the short-term wins. That's super, super important.
So I'm going to say this is also on the hiring side and on the you get help. Like, you don't go it alone. I don't like whether it's with me or somebody else. Like, there's resources that are out there that you should use and for someone who can help you with things. Recruiting is a pain in the ass on the hiring side. Scheduling, feedback, negotiations, screening, all that stuff that's involved with it is a time-consuming, horrible process. And people bitch about the cost of it. I hate to tell you this. Number 1, it's not your money. Number 2, you don't have the time or the resources to do it. So get help. Get someone who understands the business. I mean, like, knows what you're doing, why you're doing it, what you're building, how to, understands if you're a candidate looking for a job. Find somebody that, really understands what you're doing, not just understands that, I'm a Python developer. What the hell is that? Get someone who understands, the industries you work in, what you're building, who's using them, your focus, your architecture, what you like to talk about. And then when you're talking to someone, you should be able to be honest with somebody, what you like, what you don't like, the reason why you like it, the reason why you don't like it. And that person should have your best interest at heart. And if they don't, fire them.
I think, I think that's a great place to end. Unless Ian, Dylan, you have anything else you want to say? All right.
No.
Well, thank you, listener/viewer, for staying along with us on this ride. We hope you found this advice and everything we talked about valuable. As always, please like, comment, share, subscribe, turn on the bell notifications, all of that stuff, all that fun stuff. And we will see you next time. See ya.